My name is Lenora Vale, 33 years old. Laughter kept blooming from the dining room like it had nowhere else to go, bright and effortless, while Dad lifted his glass to make a toast. I almost let my phone buzz itself into silence on the kitchen counter until I saw the caller ID. Mark. Secure line. My thumb froze. My husband never called during family gatherings, not unless the world was moving under our feet. I slipped into the hallway, the family photos lining the wall like a chorus telling me everything was fine. Hey, honey, I whispered, pretending to smile so my voice would sound normal. Where are you? His voice was low, flat, and urgent. At Dad's birthday dinner. Why? A breath. Take our son and leave, right now. The glass in my hand knocked against the wall and rang like a bell. What? Mark, what is happening? No time. Go. The line went dead. The silence after felt wrong, too heavy for a house filled with cake and jokes and old Marine stories. I stared at a photo of Dad in uniform, Mom's hand tucked into his arm, my little boy on his lap, blissfully sticky with popsicle years ago. Safe, normal. Words that suddenly felt like props. Lenora! Dad's voice floated down the hall, warm and proud. We're cutting the cake. I pushed a smile onto my face, walked in, and reached for my son's hand. Buddy, let's grab your toy from the car. He blinked up at me. Now? Now. Mom's eyes narrowed, mother radar pinging. Everything okay? Yeah, I lied, the word thin as paper. Be right back. The night air hit cold and honest. I buckled my son into his booster, fingers shaking. That's when I saw it. A black SUV 2 houses down, windows tinted, engine idling just enough to thread the air with ghost white exhaust. Its headlights flickered once, like a signal. I didn't wave back. I slid behind the wheel, checked the mirrors. The SUV didn't move, not yet. I started the engine and eased down the driveway, the house glowing behind us like a memory I hadn't chosen to leave. Mom, where are we going? My son asked, voice soft. Somewhere safe, I said, and wished the words came with instructions. At the first red light, I reached for tissues in the glove box and touched something that wasn't cardboard. A flash drive wrapped in a folded note. Mark's handwriting, sharp, deliberate. If I can't reach you again, trust no one, not even your father. My throat closed. Not even your father. The light turned green. Horns complained. I drove. 5 minutes later, the night tore itself open. White-hot light behind us, then orange like a sunrise that hurt. I slammed the brakes and stared into the rear view. A bloom of fire swallowed the sky where the house had stood. The sound arrived a breath later, a gut-deep roar that shook the steering wheel and reached down my spine. Every toast, every laugh, every gentle thing turned brittle in a single breath. My son flinched. I took his hand and made my voice small and certain. It's okay, baby. It's okay. I didn't look back again. The highway unspooled empty, the dark thick around the headlights. I drove faster. Mark's voice lived in the cabin with us the way he sounded when there was danger and no room for softness. Leave. Right now. He had never sounded afraid. Not when he came home with stories he couldn't tell or bruises he shrugged away. Not when he taught me the difference between noise and signal. At a gas station, I pulled beside the pumps but didn't turn off the engine. The note burned in my lap. Trust no one, not even your father. Dad, the man who ironed shirts at dawn, who saluted the flag in the living room during the anthem, who organized food drives in the off-season because soldiers' families still needed to eat. The idea that I couldn't trust him sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't swallow. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered. Lenora, a whisper. It's Ben, your father's aide. The name made the stone shift. Ben, what is going on? Don't go home. Don't pick up for anyone calling from base. Stay off the... Static tore the line in half. Then nothing. I stared at my reflection in the glass of the convenience store. A woman with wild eyes, hair knotted fast, a boy sleeping in the back seat, his cheek pressed to the window like the world couldn't possibly harm him. The SUV from the street didn't appear. Maybe it didn't need to. I chose a roadside motel with a flickering sign the color of bad neon. Paid cash. Carried my son in, warm, heavy, trusting. laid him on the bed, and set a chair against the door. I booted the laptop and stared at the flash drive like it might bite. Mark used to joke, "If you ever find a drive in the car, it means I really messed up." We laughed then. Now the joke felt like a will. I plugged it in. At first, empty. Then a single file appeared, like it had been waiting to decide about me. Read me when safe. I clicked. Coordinates. A date. December 12th. A line at the bottom. If I don't come home, tell our son the truth. I checked my phone. December 11th. Tomorrow. Outside, a car rolled slow past the window. A silhouette got out, lifted a hood, stood there longer than a hood takes. I cut the lights and held my breath until he left. I wanted to call Mark again, straight to voicemail. I almost dialed the hospital. The local news said 1 injured, no fatalities. Dad. My finger hovered over the number. Trust no one. So I did what fear never wants you to do. I read the file again, letting the coordinates settle into my bones, letting the date become a drum. Tomorrow, something waited that might fix this or finish us. My son turned over and mumbled about his toy truck. I tucked the blanket to his chin. "Mom's here," I whispered, auditioning strength I didn't feel. The room hummed with the kind of quiet that knows it won't last. I could still see the SUV's headlights flicker in my mind. One small blink like a doorbell, not a chase. A confirmation. As if someone wanted me to know they were already inside the story, already close. On the desk, the flash drive caught a blade of neon light and looked innocent. Families look innocent in photographs too. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark a long time, counting the seconds between the hum of the soda machine and the throb of my pulse, making a list of the only truths I had left. Mark said run. The house exploded. A note warned me off my own blood. Tomorrow had coordinates, and if I wanted my son to have a future, I had to walk into whatever waited there with my eyes open. I'd always thought betrayal was a sharp thing, one cut, one wound, but tonight it felt slow, a quiet leak that soaked everything you loved until you couldn't tell where the damage began. I whispered to the dark, to the man who might already be gone, "I'll find the truth." The words sounded small, but they were a vow. I woke before the motel's alarm clock knew how to blink, the room still washed in blue from the parking lot light that never slept. My son snored softly, a small rasp that made me want to cry for how normal it sounded. I made instant coffee with tap water, and the packet tasted like cardboard and stubbornness. The coordinates and the date pulsed behind my eyes like low tide. My phone sat face down. I turned it over, not to call anyone, but to watch the seconds change. Waiting for courage is like waiting for a bus that runs when it wants. I opened the laptop instead and slid the flash drive in again. The folder was empty like before. I tried an old habit from my Navy days: show hidden files. 2 new items blinked into place, as if the machine had been holding its breath: Project Ephesus and Contact List. I clicked the first. Columns populated the screen: coordinates, timestamps, dollar amounts, a map of money with the patience of a river. The shell names stacked in polite fonts: Tidewater Trade, Everson Maritime, Laurel Group. I scrolled further. A column labeled Hensley Consulting threaded through like a signature. My father's firm. The room went silent in a new way, the kind that reshapes your bones. The contact list was worse. Names I knew from Dad's retirement barbecues, from Christmas parties where men shook hands like they meant it. A few names were marked in red: compromised, a word I'd only ever seen behind classification walls. Next to one of them, a note in Mark's clipped shorthand: seen at Trident Systems meeting. Norfolk Marina, 22 Helsrow. I could smell the river just reading it. I closed my eyes and tried to make the math come out clean. Maybe those shell companies were legit. Maybe the word compromise meant something else. Maybe Mark had wanted me to doubt everyone so I wouldn't walk back into a trap. Maybe. The word had too many rooms and none with windows. A knock, sharp and precise, tapped the door. I didn't move. It came again. I edged to the peephole. A man in a brown delivery uniform stared at the seam of the door as if he didn't care whether I opened it. He set a small padded envelope on the mat and left without looking back. I waited through 30 heartbeats, slid the chair aside, cracked the door, grabbed the envelope, locked everything again, and only then breathed. No return address. Inside, a key on a plain ring and a typed line. Locker 47. Arlington Storage. Thursday, 6 a.m. No signature. No flourish. My name wasn't on the envelope, but it had found me here anyway. Cash payment, fake name at the desk, and still, delivery. Either caution was a fairy tale or someone knew the ending before I did. I texted no one. I turned on the TV for the first time and kept it muted. Local station. Gas leak causes fire at Fairfax County residence. 1 injured, no fatalities. A photo of the house I grew up in rolled across the screen like an accusation. I pictured Dad in a hospital bed, the IV pole like a flagpole with nothing to fly. My finger hovered over his number again. Stupid with love. Trust no one. Trust, the word said, is not a feeling. It is a ledger. Pay attention to the entries. My son stirred. "Mom?" he whispered, hair stuck up like a small, startled bird. "We're okay," I said. It wasn't a lie. We were breathing. I handed him a cereal bar and opened the laptop one more time, as if the files might confess a little more in the morning. They didn't. They just insisted. By afternoon, I had a plan and a backup plan and a plan for when the backup burned. We napped in our clothes. Ready to run is not sleep, but it's what I had. When I woke, the light that through the curtains had the thin color of a day that never meant to be beautiful. My phone buzzed against the particle board nightstand. Unknown. I almost ignored it. I didn't. "Lenora," a hiss of a voice. "Ben." I pressed the phone tight. "Where are you?" "Moving," he said. "You have to stay off the grid. They're monitoring calls from base numbers. If anyone says they're calling for your father, hang up." "Ben, tell me what you know." He exhaled like a man trying to blow out a fire with his lungs. "Not over this line." Static crawled through his words. "Look, Trident Systems. Laurel Group, don't..." The call died. I stared at the meaningless icons that meant everything. The phone suddenly felt like a flare gun pointed at us from the wrong end. I ran scenarios. If the package was from Mark, why a typewritten note when he's a pen and paper creature who likes to leave small proofs of himself? If it wasn't from him, who had the rhythm of our lives down well enough to clock a 6 a.m. rendezvous at a facility near the Beltway that opens exactly when commuters get careless? Someone inside our orbit, or someone who wanted me to think that. I put my son to bed early and sat by the door with the chain on and the chair braced and the bedside lamp off. In the dark, the room felt like a waiting room for a decision. I thought about Dad teaching me to ride a bike in the cul-de-sac and the way I swore I'd never trust my feet. Then suddenly I did. Suddenly the wheel stopped wobbling because I looked where I wanted to go. A lesson disguised as a childhood summer, that your center of gravity obeys your attention. I forced mine forward. At 3 a.m., the world was all truck brakes and humming ice machines, and a woman on the second floor crying softly in a language I didn't know. I made another instant coffee, and it tasted like surrender, but kept me upright. At 4, I folded a note to the clerk with a number to call if anyone asked for me using my real name. A breadcrumb with teeth. Before dawn, we were on the road, my son a bundled comma in the back seat. The sky over Virginia wore that pre-morning bruise. I kept to the right lane, past no one, let everyone pass me. Fear makes you dramatic. Survival makes you boring. Be boring, Mark taught me. Noise attracts attention. Silence builds options. The radio whispered headlines I didn't need. I turned it off and listened to the tires. As we crossed into Arlington, commuters joined like tributaries. Red taillights stitched along lanes like a warning sign. I circled the block twice, counted cameras, counted exits, counted people who looked like they were pretending to be people. At a church lot 2 blocks from the storage facility, I parked under a tired maple tree. I adjusted the rear view so it framed my son's sleeping face. "I'll be right back," I told him, even though I didn't move yet. I traced the key's grooves with my thumb. It felt ordinary. That's what I hated most. The evil in this never looked like a villain. It looked like paperwork and friendships and a key stamped with the number that meant someone would be waiting. I checked my phone one last time, saw no messages, and powered it down. If I was going to walk into a trap, I wanted to at least choose the step. I stepped out into the kind of cold that finds the soft parts first. The storage rows stretched like metallic ribs. My breath ghosted. A janitor swept near the fence, eyes down. A man 3 rows over unloaded boxes from a dented car, his posture too casual for the hour. I kept my pace small and even. Locker 47 waited near the center, the door clean of dents, the lock new. The key slid in like it belonged. The click echoed louder than it should have. Inside sat a plain duffel and a manila envelope taped to the back wall. On the envelope, block letters. If you found this, you're already in danger. My hands didn't shake until after I tore it open. Photographs spilled out. Dad shaking hands with men in suits I didn't know. Conference tables with windows black as mirrors. A marina shot where the water looked like oil, and my father stood beside a man I did know from barbecues and speeches, Cal Whitaker. In one picture, me with my son at a county fair, a red circle around my head like a target a child would draw because he didn't know what it meant. I had to lean on the metal lip of the locker to keep my knees from choosing the floor. Taped behind the envelope, a smaller flash drive. Old, scuffed, stubborn. I plugged it into the laptop on the concrete. The folder name landed like scripture and threat. Ephesus Recordings. Audio files. Mark's voice came through the tinny speakers like I'd called him from another life. If you're hearing this, Lenora, I didn't make it out. Your father's company is being used as a front. He doesn't see the full picture. Agent Lewis might be clean. Someone close already knows you're moving. If it's not me at the door, don't open it. I paused the file, the word clean lingering like permission and a dare. A gull cut a line across the slice of sky visible above the corridor, and for no reason at all, I thought about the SUV's single blink. Confirmation, not pursuit. Whoever signaled that night hadn't needed to follow. They just needed to be sure the first domino fell. I gathered the photos, the drive, the envelope. I shut the locker, turned the key, and let the metal door roll down slow so it wouldn't sing. When it latched, the sound traveled through the cold and into my spine like an answer I couldn't read yet. I walked back to the car with my chin down and my posture ordinary. I did not look for cameras. You don't stare at the fence if you think it's electric. You just move like you belong to the ground you're on. In the reflection of the office window, I saw the dented sedan's driver glance at his watch without looking at time. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. At the car, my son stirred. "We going home?" he mumbled. "We're going to find the truth," I told him, and for the first time since the fire, the sentence didn't sound small. It sounded like a line in the sand. I put the key on the dash where the winter sun could find it. Tomorrow had coordinates. Today had evidence. And somewhere between the two waited a friend of my father's with a smile for cameras and a ledger that bled. By sunrise, the sky over Virginia looked scraped clean. Cold silver, no warmth in sight. My son slept in the back seat, wrapped in a blanket patterned with little rockets, the same one Mark had bought before his last deployment. I drove without music, only the low hum of tires on asphalt, and my heartbeat trying to find a rhythm that didn't sound like fear. Every turn felt heavier, as if the air itself were warning me back. But that voice in my head, Mark's voice, kept replaying. If it's not me at the door, don't open it. I didn't know whether he was alive or just a ghost in my speaker, but he had never once said something he didn't mean. The coordinates in the first flash drive pulsed through my mind like a countdown. If Mark had left this trail, he wanted me to follow it. He wanted me to see what he'd seen. By the time I reached the hospital, daylight had fully arrived. Too bright, too honest. The brick facade glowed like something scrubbed clean, hiding what it really was, a place where truth and lies shared the same white sheets. I parked near the far end of the lot. My hands rested on the steering wheel a few seconds longer than they should have. Inside, the air smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. The nurse at the front desk pointed me toward room 214 with the same smile people use when they're hiding pity. Dad was sitting up when I walked in, a bandage on his arm, IV taped neatly along his wrist. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but as if a piece of his certainty had burned away with the house. "Lenora," he said softly, relief flickering in his tired eyes. "Thank God. I heard you left before the explosion. Are you both all right?" "Yeah," I lied, pulling the chair closer. "We're fine." He reached for my hand. His was warm, steady, too steady. "It was an accident," he said quickly. "The investigators said it started in the basement. Faulty water heater. They'll have the full report soon." Something inside me twisted. He'd rehearsed that line. I could hear it in the cadence, the clipped military precision that always came out when he wanted control. "Dad," I said quietly, Did you ever work with a company called Trident Systems? His grip tightened. Where did you hear that name? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. His eyes gave me the truth before his mouth could shape the lie. They sharpened, old reflexes snapping back. The Marine, not the father. It's classified, he said finally, each word weighed. Lenora, some things you don't want to dig into. Then why did Mark call me last night? I asked. He frowned, puzzled, or pretending. Mark, he's not... He hesitated. Lenora, there's something you need to know about your husband. But before he could continue, a nurse entered with a clipboard. Colonel Hensley, time for your tests. He gave me a look that was part warning, part plea. Go home, sweetheart. I'll explain everything later. I stood, but not because I believed him. The lie hung in the sterile air like disinfectant, strong enough to sting. As I walked down the hall, I could still feel his eyes following me. That same man who'd taught me to never leave a comrade behind was now leaving me in the dark. Outside, the wind cut sharper. I sat in the car for a long time before starting the engine. In the reflection of the windshield, I saw my own face, haunted, pale, foreign. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Lenora, the voice whispered. Who is this? Ben, I can't talk long. Where are you? Nowhere safe. Listen, there's a meeting scheduled at the Arlington Underpass. 5 a.m. tomorrow. Come alone. Bring the drives. You'll understand everything. Ben, what meeting? What is this about? Static chewed through his words. Then, they'll come after you if you talk to anyone, not even your father. The line went dead. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the steering wheel just to steady them. I wanted to believe Dad. I wanted to believe that the explosion really was an accident, that Mark was wrong, that this nightmare would end if I just went home. But there's a moment when denial collapses under its own weight, when what you've seen can't be unseen. The photographs, the files, the red circles. Dad had looked at me with the same eyes he used to give orders. Mark's voice had sounded like a man trying to save what he loved. I didn't know who was lying, but I knew who was afraid. And fear, I'd learned, was often the truest language a person speaks. That night, I packed a small bag and double-checked the locks twice. My son was asleep before his head even touched the pillow. I kissed his forehead and whispered a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. I'll keep you safe, whatever it takes. At 4:45 a.m., the motel parking lot was a sea of frost. I loaded my son into the car, his breath fogging the window as he mumbled about dreams. We drove toward Arlington in silence, headlights slicing the dawn. The underpass loomed ahead, gray concrete ribs spanning a strip of road no one loved enough to fix. Pigeons huddled on the beams, the air heavy with damp metal and Chaumet's exhaust. I parked 2 blocks away near a church lot, just like Ben had told me once in training. Never walk straight into the meat. Watch first, loop back, check for tails. I circled once, twice. 2 cars idled at the curb. One I recognized from the hospital yesterday. The other, a dented sedan with one missing hubcap. I kept walking. On my second pass, I saw him, Ben, leaning against a column, wearing a windbreaker too light for the weather. His face looked thinner, drawn. He wasn't holding a phone. Smart. Ben, I said softly, stopping several feet away. He nodded, voice low. You came. Start talking. He glanced around. You have the drives? I didn't answer. Good, he said, understanding my silence. They're watching both of us. Probably your father, too. He's not guilty, Lenora, but he's being used. There's a man named Whitaker, Cal Whitaker, Trident Systems. He's the link. He's using your father's company to move prototype data overseas. I stared at him. The name hit me like a wave I hadn't seen coming. Whitaker, the man who gave Dad the watch he wore every Veterans Day, the one who called me kiddo and sent me birthday cards signed with a smiley face. No, I whispered. That's impossible. Ben shook his head. It's not. Whitaker's the bridge, and he's tied to a program called Ephesus. That's what Mark was investigating. How do you know? Because Mark told me before he disappeared. He said if anything happened, I should pass this to you. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a worn, green field notebook, the edges frayed, pages swollen from rain. Everything's in here. Dates, payments, meeting points. I hesitated. Set it down, I said. He crouched, placed it near the concrete pillar. You don't have long, he warned. They're already here. Before I could ask who, he looked past me, eyes narrowing. I turned. The driver of the dented sedan had stepped out, phone pressed to his ear, but he wasn't talking. "Run," Ben said quietly. I grabbed the notebook and bolted toward the stairs leading up to the street. Footsteps followed. 2 sets, heavy and fast. A shout rang out. "Federal agents, stop!" I didn't believe them. Ben turned, drawing their attention. "She's not your target," I heard him yell. Then the crack of a gunshot, not loud, but final. I didn't look back. By the time I reached the top, dawn had broken open, spilling pale light over the street. A bus hissed at the curb, doors closing. I slipped between them, blending into the handful of commuters who smelled of coffee and tired hope. When I reached the car, my son was still asleep. I started the engine and drove, hands trembling, heart pounding hard enough to shake the wheel. In the rearview mirror, I saw 2 unmarked cars peel away from the curb, headed the other direction. Ben's sacrifice bought me seconds. Maybe that's all courage really is, what you do with your last few seconds. I dialed the Langley liaison number Mark had once given me. "This is Agent Lewis," a calm female voice answered. "This is Lenora Vale. I have information regarding Project Ephesus, and I have Mark Vale's field journal." Silence, then, "Where?" "St. Luke's Chapel, Fort Myer, noon." Another pause. "Who will be there?" "My father," I said. "And if you're clean, come alone." I ended the call. Outside the windshield, morning light washed the horizon gold. My son stirred, blinking awake. "Mom, where are we going?" I reached back, brushed his hair from his forehead, and smiled, though my chest was tight. "We're going to find Grandpa," I said softly. "And then we're going to find the truth." The sun hung low over Fort Myer, pale gold bleeding into the winter air. The chapel rose ahead, white walls, arched windows, the flag outside whispering in the breeze. I slowed the car at the gate, my pulse drumming so loud it almost drowned the guard's greeting. My father's name carried weight here. It always had. But today, that name could either save us or bury us. My son stirred in the back seat, clutching his toy truck. "Are we visiting Grandpa?" he asked. "Yeah," I said softly. "We are." I parked near the courtyard and stepped out. The cold hit like truth, sharp and clean. I tucked the field notebook under my coat, the flash drives in my pocket. Every step toward that chapel felt heavier, like walking into the pages of a story that was about to end one way or another. Inside, the air was still, faintly scented with wax and cedar polish. My father sat near the front, dressed in his marine coat, sling looped over his shoulder. His eyes lifted when he heard the door creak. For a moment, he looked almost relieved, until he saw the resolve in my face. "Lenora," he said quietly, standing with effort, "you shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," I answered, "but here we are." Before he could respond, the side door opened. A woman in a gray suit stepped in, slim, composed, her badge clipped at her lapel. "Agent Lewis," she introduced herself, voice firm but calm. "Internal Affairs." Dad's jaw clenched. "You brought the CIA here?" "I brought the truth here," I said. Lewis gave him a polite nod. "Colonel Hensley, we only need a few clarifications regarding your consultancy, specifically your relationship with a Mr. Calvin Whitaker." The name hit the air like a gunshot. Dad's color drained. "Whitaker's a friend. What is this about?" Lewis opened a folder, crisp pages glinting under the stained glass light. "We have evidence Mr. Whitaker has been funneling restricted weapons data to private buyers through Project Ephesus. We believe your company was used to validate several fraudulent contracts." "That's insane," Dad barked. "I've known Cal for 20 years. The heavy chapel doors opened again before he could finish. 2 men entered, dark suits, expressionless. Between them, Calvin Whitaker himself, smiling that same calm boardroom smile that never touched his eyes. "Robert," he said smoothly, like this was just another meeting. "Good to see you walking. I was worried after the accident." Dad took a step forward. "Cal, what the hell is going on?" Whitaker's gaze drifted past him, landing on me. "You shouldn't have involved your daughter, Bob, or her husband." At that name, husband, the side door opened once more. Mark stepped in. He looked different, thinner, arm in a sling, but alive. My breath caught so hard it hurt. His eyes met mine, steady, apologetic, full of exhaustion and something like peace. "Hey, Em," he said softly. "Sorry I'm late." Dad froze. "Mark, you—" "I told you I'd find proof, sir," Mark interrupted, crossing to the front pew. He pulled a USB from his pocket and placed it on the wood. "Everything's here. Every file Whitaker used. Every transfer through the Veterans Fund. You were set up. Whitaker's composure cracked for the first time. You don't know what you're talking about, he hissed. Those files are classified. Lewis raised her badge higher. Not anymore. She gestured to the men in suits behind her. Take him. Whitaker turned on my father, voice breaking. They're making a fool of you, Robert. After everything we... Enough! Dad's shout echoed through the chapel, hard and final. His shoulders slumped as the cuffs clicked around Whitaker's wrists. God help me, he whispered. I didn't know. Mark looked at him with quiet respect. You weren't supposed to, sir. That's how they keep good men loyal. Blind them with trust. As Whitaker was led out, the chapel fell silent. Dust drifted through the light like snow. My son peeked from the back pew, wide-eyed but calm. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel poisoned. Dad sank onto the pew, rubbing his face. I misjudged you, Mark, he said hoarsely, and I owe you my life and my daughter's. Mark shook his head. You don't owe me anything. You just need to come home. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then Dad reached for my hand. I'm sorry, Lenora, for doubting you, for not listening sooner. Tears slipped down before I could stop them. Just promise me we're done hiding. He nodded slowly. We are. The noon bells began to toll outside, clear, resonant, steady. Mark's fingers brushed mine, grounding me back into the present. It's over, Em, he said softly. I wanted to believe him. We walked out together, father, daughter, husband, child, into the December air that smelled faintly of smoke and redemption. My son ran ahead, chasing pigeons across the courtyard, laughter bright against the winter sky. For the first time since that night, I let myself breathe. But deep inside, I knew peace wasn't the end of this story. It was only the beginning of what came after, the reckoning, the rebuilding, the choosing of who we'd be when all the lies were gone. Mark reached for my hand again. I didn't pull away. We stood there in the cold sunlight, two survivors learning how to start over. That afternoon, we drove south toward the harbor in Norfolk. The sky hung low and bruised, the kind of gray that never promises rain but keeps you guessing. My son dozed in the back seat, his toy truck clutched to his chest, while Dad rode up front, staring out at the waves of traffic without saying much. Mark sat beside me, his arms still in a sling, eyes fixed on the horizon as if expecting ghosts to appear there. None of us spoke for the first hour. Silence, I'd learned, could either heal or suffocate, depending on what it followed. This one felt like both. When the sea finally came into view, steel water flecked with light, it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for days. The dock where Mark had proposed still stood at the end of the pier, railings rusted but proud. I parked near the edge, killed the engine, and for a moment we just sat there, letting the quiet salt air fill the car. Dad broke first. You know, he said, voice rough. I spent half my life preaching vigilance. Thought the hardest thing was surviving battle. Turns out it's knowing when the war's over. Mark turned his head, his tone gentle but edged with truth. Sometimes the enemy doesn't wear a flag, sir. Sometimes he wears your trust. Dad nodded slowly. You're right. He looked older in that light, not weaker, just honest for the first time in a long time. I keep thinking how close I came to losing all of you because I couldn't imagine my friends capable of betrayal. I wanted to tell him that trust was never the sin. The sin was what people did with it, but the words stayed in my throat. We got out of the car. The wind was sharp but clean, the kind that tastes like second chances. My son ran ahead, laughing as seagulls scattered. For a moment, watching him, the world almost felt simple again. Mark joined me at the railing, the same spot where he'd said, if the world ever goes dark, follow the light, not the noise. I hadn't understood it back then. Now I did. What happens now? I asked. He shrugged. Internal affairs will finish the case. Whitaker's facing charges. Your father's cleared officially. I'll get my clearance back. Maybe take a desk job for a while. You'll hate it, I said softly. He smiled faintly. Probably. But for now, I'm tired of being a ghost. Dad stayed by the car, staring out at the water, his hands folded behind his back. The wind caught the edge of his coat, and for a moment, he looked like the man from the framed photos again. Strong, certain, unbent. I walked back toward him. They're calling you a whistleblower now, I said. A hero. He gave a dry laugh. Funny thing about heroism. It always comes after you've already lost something you can't get back. Mark came closer, nodding toward him. You still stood up when it mattered. That counts for more than the medals. Dad looked at him a long moment, then extended his good hand. You brought my daughter home. That's what counts for me. They shook, and something heavy finally lifted between them. We stayed there until the sky turned amber and the gulls went quiet. My son's laughter echoed across the water, the sound pure enough to make my throat ache. That evening, back at Dad's house, the rebuilt one, smaller, simpler, we sat on the porch with mugs of tea. The smell of fried chicken drifted from the kitchen. My son chased the dog around the oak tree while the flag in the yard snapped gently in the breeze. "Feels like the old days," Dad said, smiling. "Better," I answered, "because now we know how close we came to losing them." He nodded. "You know, when Mark called you that night, I thought he was tearing our family apart. Turns out he was the one holding it together." "I think he'd say the same about you," I said. He chuckled, eyes soft. "Maybe." Mark joined us on the porch, leaning on the railing. The sunset spilled across his face, turning the world gold. For the first time, I saw peace in him. Not the restless kind soldiers fake, but the real kind that grows after survival. "You ever think about how all of this started?" he asked quietly. "Just one phone call." I smiled, the sound of it surprising me. "I think about it every day. It was the worst sound I ever heard, and the best thing that ever happened to us." "Funny," he said, "how those can be the same." I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his breath against my hair. "Maybe that's what life is," I murmured, learning which sounds to run from and which ones to run toward. He squeezed my hand. "You always ran toward the right ones, Em." I wasn't sure that was true. I doubted, hesitated, trusted too late, feared too soon. But maybe that's what redemption really was. Not erasing the mistakes, just living honestly with their echoes. Night fell gentle and slow. The porch light flickered on, and the flag in the yard caught the last blush of the sun. My son curled up on Grandpa's lap, the dog snoring at their feet. The crickets started their quiet symphony, steady and forgiving. I looked around at all of it, the house rebuilt, the people I loved still breathing, and realized the truth I'd been chasing had never been about files or conspiracies. It had been about this moment, finding peace after the fire. "Mark?" I whispered. "Yeah, we're home." He smiled, soft and certain. "Yeah, we are." The next morning, I watched Dad raise the flag again. His movements were slower now, but deliberate. When he saluted, it wasn't ceremony, it was gratitude. The sun warmed the porch rails, and for the first time in months, I believed in calm. Mark poured coffee behind me. The radio murmured news about peace talks overseas. The word peace didn't sound distant anymore. It sounded possible. I carried my mug outside and looked up at the flag rippling in the morning light. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd find peace through betrayal, I would have laughed. But now I knew better. Peace doesn't come after the fire. It's what you build from the ashes. I whispered to the quiet air, to anyone who might be listening. Trust is earned, not by words, but by actions. Patriotism isn't blind loyalty. It's the courage to tell the truth. And forgiveness is what keeps families alive. The wind carried the words away, soft but steady. And somewhere deep inside, I knew they'd find their mark. Because sometimes one phone call doesn't end everything. Sometimes it saves it.